Welcome, everybody. My name is Michael Hilkemeyer, ICT Solutions Australia. With me is the fabulous Alfina Jackson, who was, I was just told, the delayed Educator of the Year for ICTE New South Wales branch. And for those who don't know what that is the what is
Information and Communication
yes,
Technology
yeah,
Educators of New South Wales, one
correct.
of the professional organisations under the Australian Computing Society.
Yep, absolutely. And yeah, Athena's been so great to come in today and to share her experiences and knowledge about technology integration. So, welcome to this session.
Thank you.
Um, First of all, I wonder if you can explain, how did this, come about? Like, what was the process that was in place for you to be able to get that award? What did you do?
Well, it's a nomination form, and a couple of colleagues approached me when the nomination form came out and said, "This is something that you should fill in." And the nomination form has two parts. It's the nominee has to fill in something, and then the person being nominated has to fill in something. So, a couple of colleagues said, "Go ahead, fill it in." Um, and the rest is history. I was able to receive the 2023 Educator of the Year at the March conference earlier this year, which was amazing and unexpected. There's so many amazing educators out there that I didn't think that I'd be in the running, but here I am.
Well, you obviously deserve it because technology integration is never a straightforward process. So, I was wondering if you could, run through a couple of your, favorite practices that you like to sort of,
Mhm.
apply in your teaching and learning environment.
Um, I'm primary trained and I'm based in primary schools, which makes it a bit more challenging, especially the fact that I love early years, K to two, and that's where I spent the bulk of my career. And I'm fortunate now that I've moved to the Mid North Coast, I'm in a STEM role across K to six. Depending on the years. This year I have K and one at one school and stage one and stage three at another school. So I teach across the primary years. And I suppose, even though I do teach STEM, which is primarily the New South Wales Science and Technology syllabus, one of the biggest things I push is digital literacy because that's something that all teachers should be doing. And there's a reason why Victoria has now made digital literacy part of the conversation. When you talk about literacy, you talk about numeracy, you also talk about digital literacy, because it's so important for all students to be digitally literate. And in all of, even if I'm doing a content heavy science unit that does not involve any technology, I will still go with my students, right? Here's how to create a bookmark and get to where you need to get quicker. Here's how to use keyboard shortcuts. Here's how to decipher this website. Um, Even in K and one, most kids, it's assumed that most kids know how to use an iPad. And I was teaching seesaw to kindy kids the other day, and I'm like, you press the home button. They're like, what's a home button? Because they're not used to naming the parts. So teaching kids how to be literate in terms of hardware and software is really important, as well as those skills of handing off to another device or another platform. So if they're using Seesaw on an iPad and then you put a Chromebook in front of them, some kids go, how do I use that? And being able to device switch. Those really simple digital literacy skills before you even touch digital technologies are really important because it teaches that resilience to be able to um, problem solve and be a bit more creative than just be a swiper, so to speak.
Yep. Well, that sounds like, I couldn't agree, more with you there, Fina, like, about digital literacy. It is so important to sort of hone in on, those capabilities.
Hmm.
And I think, just recently, the Australian curriculum itself changed. It used to be called ICT capabilities. Now it's
Hmm.
digital literacy capabilities. So, there's even more reason there to sort of, you know, focus on
Yeah.
and helping teachers to understand how to pass on, that knowledge to children so that they can
And
go from one device to, you know,
to the next.
to the next.
And with like I'm New South Wales, so New South Wales has their own curriculum, but I still refer to the Australian curriculum version 9 digital literacies framework. It's a great framework, and people go to me, "Oh, I need a scope and sequence for skills," and I said, "They've got a scope and sequence for digital literacy skills ready for you. As simple as creating, you've got your security continuum. It is such a great starting point for teachers, no matter which curriculum in Australia you are using, because we've got to make things difficult. Um, it's a great framework for teachers to start going, what skills do I need to teach my students? It's not about how to use a mouse. It's not, oh, we're going to use Word today. We're going to use Google today, and this is how to use it. It's how to teach those higher order skills, as simple as privacy as well. Privacy, your cybersecurity, that's all there in that wonderful scope and sequence that Akara has already put together.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned like you are a STEM teacher from KD6. What are some of the questions that you know that other teachers might approach you in terms of what to do?
So one of my biggest questions I get is the logging on process across systems. Oh, they have like three-factor authentication to log in. And my argument is I taught kindergarten for many years, and I had my kinders logging in by mid-semester, like by mid-year, independently, because it was something I dedicated time to. Did it in small groups rather than whole class, made sure they were supported, brought in the buddies. And I have teachers who teach year one who go, oh, they're logging in pro so hard. I'm like, why is it hard? Is it hard because you're not dedicating time to it? I mean, if my 3-year-old can access the Apple TV with no problems whatsoever and use voice search, I'm pretty sure your year one kids can learn how to log in independently. That's the biggest question I get about the logging in process. And I see it on online forums as well. And I think if you set kids up for success and you dedicate time to it, there's so much kids can do afterwards.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And it just again comes down to what you were saying for earlier, feeling about you know helping teachers just understand what they need, the process of how it works.
Yeah.
Um, and for some, it takes a little bit longer to understand, but
Hmm.
I think once they grasp it, the concept, they'll begin to see how it could all just sort of connect
Yeah.
much better. What is a particular example that you can remember that where you integrated technology into a learning activity or project um, that you that, that resulted in a positive learning outcome
Hmm.
experience for the children?
I suppose like people assume because I'm very techy that I've used the br the breadth of tech that's out there, and I haven't. And in fact, last year was my very first year playing with microbits, and I had stage two class, and we were looking at the New South Wales science outcome, looking at heat energy and light energy, and so the physical world outcomes. And so after doing a variety of experiments, looking at the properties of heat, the properties of light, we looked at a great video that's quite old now, almost 10 years old, by Matt Moran and KidSafe on the overheating of cars. So we used that as a hook. And really got kids to think about, well, why is this car overheating? So then that connected it to materials as well. And so the kids had to do the old good old solar oven experiment. And but they'd done all this learning beforehand. And I pulled out your traditional thermometer and I said, we're going to put a thermometer in there to see how whose solar ovens get the warmest. But then we also use program microbits. And in New South Wales stage one technology, sorry, stage two, the digital technology side, stage two just has to copy an algorithm pretty much. So I gave them the algorithm. They had practice using the block coding, loaded that all into their microbit, and they had the thermometer and the microbit side by side in their solar ovens, and then they had to record. Um, that was an amazing learning experience for them because they then learned how to calibrate that thermometer. They learned the digital thermometer, the microbit. They learned how to do a bit of coding, and then they did the data collection. But then it was the reflection afterwards. We had a lot of discrepancies between the thermometer and the microbit, and we started looking at why, and that came back to the science. Some kids had their thermometer in the sun, but then where they put their microbit, their solar oven created a shadow, which prevented clear readings on their microbit. Um, there was also the LEDs in the sun weren't very clear to read. So then that created further things. Well, how can we um, create, like, how can we adapt this or how can we create a second iteration? Then they programmed it so when button A was pressed, that's when it did the readings. And I said, like, well, what else can we do? So kids then come up saying, can we set up a timer so that every 5 minutes it gave us a reading so we don't have to constantly create a shadow and press? So it created a wealth of conversations. We then we did run out of time, but then on reflection, the stage three outcome is then to modify code. Some of these kids were thinking about in stage two, how do I modify the code? And in fact, some of these kids, a small group of my kids have moved into stage three with me. And we're working on a competition, a national competition called STEM MAD, run by the Catholic dioceses. MAD stands for Make a Difference. And so they've taken that learnings from last year and they're going, how can we create a device that can warn parents that their kid or their pet is overheating in the car? And so now we're integrating some of that second iterations into their coding for that competition. So from what started off as an introduction to microbits for me and for them turned into a wealth of learning. And I suppose a lot of teachers go, you must have been using microbits for years. And I said, no, that's my first time. And the kids are now building on that knowledge. I follow them into stage three, and they've been able to play around with those microbits a bit more, which is fantastic.
Awesome. That sounds like, that, they really enjoyed that experience.
Yeah, they did. And it wasn't just about technology, it was integrating it with other learning, which I suppose with digital technologies as a separate syllabus in other states as part of ACARA, New South Wales put it as part of science technology. I've got that ability to do an actual STEM unit because I need to hit the two different outcomes.
Yep, absolutely. So what are some of the issues or barriers then that you have faced with technology integration, and what have been some of the ways that you've been able to overcome those?
I suppose part of it is um, walking into a school and finding a cupboard full of technology that has this much dust on it, and you can tell that no one's touched it. Um, and then you start sifting through it. And like at one school, I only teach K and one, so I don't touch a lot of the higher end technology with K and one. But I revisit that cupboard to stock take, and things are still there. And I'm like, well, what are other teachers doing? And I don't know whether it's a fear of the unknown, it's a fear of not being the expert in the room, because I've been that teacher who hasn't been the expert in the room. In fact, I once ran RoboCup where I'd never coded NXTs, which are two generations back of EV3s and Spike and Prime. And I got a kid to teach everyone else because I had no idea. So it's that fear of not being the expert in the room. I am able to teach my kids. I'm not the expert. Um, Also, the time to play. Teachers feel like they need to have some sort of knowledge. Um, I think that's the biggest challenge is that you've got a select few in schools who have the courage to play or to say, we're going to use this. I don't know how to, we're going to learn together. And then you've got the teachers who are quite happy to push that back to somebody else's problem. Um, a lot of money is spent on technology. Um, and the other problem I get is when you got a cupboard full of technology and you go to leadership saying, oh, I'd really love to buy this. They're going, but what about all that in the cupboard that's not being used? And sometimes what's in the cupboard is dated, because and no one's touched it. So money was spent on it, then no one touched it. Or it was used for a term and then no one touched it. I think that's the biggest challenge is justifying the use and to upskilling staff, especially when across the board you're seeing people promote STEM, but their money's being pulled out of STEM. It's a double-edged sword at the moment.
Oh, yeah, I couldn't agree more with you there. Like, yeah. Um, and these days, like, I was speaking with someone yesterday, um, and about AI, and
Mhm.
AI is now coming into education, and there's so many people wanting to learn about AI, and it feels like kind of like that sometimes we're moving a little too fast. Like we have all this, like you said, a couple of technology that that may not have been used for a while, or it's not used effectively enough already. And then we got AI coming in, and people want to go, right, let's learn about that. But what about this?
I
So,
think what people are forgetting about AI is that it's just another tool.
hmm,
And for me, like I'm in the primary scheme, our kids probably won't touch AI much.
hmm,
Maybe stage three might double, but um, I think it's more of a secondary problem and a tertiary problem, even though eventually probably it'll come into primary schools. But in terms of what teachers can do with it, primary teachers can do with it, I mean, I was at Google last week and we were playing with some great tools that can really help teachers. Like you've got to create three modeled text, for example, for a bumpered up wall, and you could use AI to write those three texts. And it's not a matter of going, oh, they've three texts are written, then you modify them for your context. Um, and you can, there's some great tools coming out with Google where you can put three or four sources into this closed AI and it will draw your text from those sources. Um, the time saving is amazing, but the flip side of that when it comes to students is rethinking assessment. I mean, do we need to have kids writing pages and pages of essays? Like this term, I'm getting my stage threes to not only write a scientific report. Now, if they wrote a scientific report with AI, hypothetically speaking, okay, um, that they need to demonstrate their understanding a second way. And I'm going to get them to create their own little Bill Nye the Science Guy style videos on them recreating their science investigation and verbally explaining what happened. So I'm rethinking assessment. If they do plagiarize, I
yes.
mean, they can still copy and paste their report instead of using AI, but then they have to demonstrate their understanding another way. So how are we as teachers rethinking assessment in such a way that we get these kids to use those higher order skills? Debona has creativity at the top. You've got the six thinking hats. Creativity is one of them. And then there's other frameworks as well where creating is at the top. So why are we getting these kids to do lower order skills and calling that assessment? Why not push them to the higher order and getting them then to manipulate the data they find in some way? So if they do use AI, and if it stops there, are they demonstrating in another way?
Absolutely. And finally, if another primary teacher like approached you and he was sitting on the bench, sort of a thing, unsure about whether to integrate technology, in the classroom environment, what what sort of advice, or tips would you give um to this?
I would go back to the students and go, what, like a pretest, what did the students know? Um, I once walked into a year four classroom where the kids were just dot pointing notes from their research, and I asked the teacher, who was a relatively new teacher to in terms of career, said, where are they going to go with this? They were doing their dot points straight into Microsoft Word. And he made a comment saying, oh, the zone of proximal development, this is where they're at. And I'm like, I'm sure they can do more with this. And I would go, well, what skills do you want your students to come away with at the end of the year? So they go to the next teacher. Last year we did this. Let's build upon it. So if you've got your kids note taking, for example, they can then publish. You can do a simple slide deck, as simple as that, but then create a multimodal text. The English syllabus talks about multimodal text. So why not get the kids to create their own? And you can start off with a simple slide deck. And if the kids can do that, why not build a website? And teach and do something very simple like Google Sites. And I mean, I'm high in Google, so I talk Google products, but there's other platforms as well. Um, like you can do a multimodal text in Canva and get the kids to then take their information and manipulate it. And that's where that higher order skills come in. How are they creating? And what the kids can do is amazing. I mean, I had a year one class back when we first went Google, when I was in Sydney, and I taught them Google Slides, and I had a shared slide deck, and the kids had to do book reviews in their reading group tasks. So they had to read, then do a book review, and I had a template as my first slide, and they had to then create a slide, use the prompts. They took that, and I just taught them how to insert text, how to then comment on each other. So we talked about the positive um, citizenship in commenting and only make good comments and things like that. Year one, they loved it. What they did, they then taught themselves backgrounds, taught themselves how to change the font. They then realized they could insert videos. So they went home and for homework on their own back, not
Oh,
my
wow.
homework set, they were reviewing the TV shows and the videos they were watching at home and inserting clips to show that. And kids were commenting like, oh, I want to do that. Like, thank you for sharing. They took the basic skills I taught them and explored. And I think teachers underestimate kids' abilities. I mean, you got kids at home on Minecraft building amazing worlds. Why can't they do that at school? And teaching kids the difference between play and learning. Because at home they're playing, um, but these kids were taking skills from learning and they were taking their home life and they were bringing it to school and they were expanding on those skills. So I think teachers underestimate kids a bit too much.
Well, that's fantastic advice,
Yeah.
Alfina. And so thank you so much, for coming in today. I mean, I'm sure the viewers will really appreciate the tips that you've given today, and will take it with them into the classroom. So thank you so much. Like, it's been a real pleasure to meet you
Yeah.
and to learn from your experience today. So, I hope that we can chat again sometime in the future.
Yep, definitely. And I love if anyone wants to connect and have a chat or if they have any questions, I'm happy to help. As part of my, like, I'm now on the board of ICT New South Wales. So part of my volunteer role is to help people with technology. So if anyone has any questions or want even just a brainstorm or break open outcomes, I'm happy to help.
Awesome. To learn more about how to successfully integrate technology into your early childhood learning environment, become a member of the ICT in Education Teacher Academy today and gain instant access to over 80 plus online PD workshops, webinar replays, technology integration lesson plans for early childhood education, and ebooks, all for just $20 per month. You'll find the link below this video in the description.